Marcus Hale thought he knew everything about his wife, Talia, until one afternoon revealed a secret that would turn his world upside down and pull him into a dangerous web of deception he never saw coming. Marcus Hale had always trusted the steady rhythm of his days. He believed that if he worked hard, stayed loyal, and maintained a calm home, life would reward him with stability. For years, nothing disrupted that belief. He woke early, left for work before the sun fully rose, and returned to a house that felt warm and familiar. Talia, his wife, had been part of that rhythm for so long that he rarely questioned anything about their routine. It wasn't perfect, but it was predictable, and predictability gave him peace. Slowly, tiny cracks began forming, cracks small enough to ignore at first. A scent he did not recognize lingered in the hallway one morning, sharp and floral, unlike the fragrances Talia usually wore. A misplaced earring that didn't belong to her appeared on their bathroom counter. Text notifications flashed across her phone more often, only for the messages to vanish before he could glance at the screen. Marcus tried brushing these details aside, convincing himself that marriages go through phases and people change their habits. Yet the feeling deep in his chest refused to fade. Each unusual moment added weight to an invisible pressure that followed him through every day. He found himself listening more carefully to footsteps, paying attention to the tone of Talia's voice, and noticing the slight shift in her expression whenever he asked simple questions. The moment that shattered his denial came unexpectedly. One afternoon, a sudden storm forced his workplace to shut down early. Marcus decided to return home without calling ahead, expecting to find Talia in the middle of her daily tasks. Instead, he unlocked the door and sensed instantly that something was wrong. A jacket he had never seen hung on the back of a chair. 2 glasses sat on the kitchen counter, one marked with condensation, as if recently used. Faint movement upstairs suggested someone else was in the house. Marcus froze, every suspicion he had tried to bury rising to the surface all at once. The truth, he feared, was suddenly undeniable, yet he couldn't bring himself to storm upstairs. Instead, he stepped back quietly, leaving the house as quickly as he had entered. He drove for hours without a destination, replaying the scene in his mind until exhaustion pressed on him. The life he thought he understood was unraveling, thread by thread, and he could no longer pretend it wasn't happening. Something larger, more unsettling, was beginning to take shape, something he didn't yet have the courage to face. Marcus spent the following days moving through his routines like a ghost, doing everything he normally did but without the comfort he once felt. Every quiet moment in the house felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were holding secrets he could no longer ignore. Talia acted as though nothing had changed, moving with a calm ease that only deepened his confusion. Her smile felt practiced, her stories carefully structured, and her sudden interest in running errands alone became impossible for him to overlook. He wanted to confront her, but each time the thought crossed his mind, an unexpected hesitation stopped him. Part of him feared what she might admit, while another part feared the possibility of being wrong. Instead of asking questions, he watched, listened, and collected small pieces of information as if they were clues in a puzzle he was afraid to solve. One afternoon, he decided to follow her. It wasn't something he ever imagined himself doing, but the unanswered questions had grown into something unbearable. He kept a safe distance as she drove across town, taking a route she never used. Eventually, she pulled into a quiet residential area on the outskirts of the city, far from places she normally visited. Marcus parked several houses away and waited. She entered a small rental home with faded paint and closed blinds. Minutes passed, then nearly an hour. When the door finally opened, she stepped out with a man Marcus had never seen before. The stranger kept his hands in his pockets, scanning the street with the cautiousness of someone who had something to hide. Talia spoke briefly with him before they separated, walking in opposite directions as though trying to avoid drawing attention. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't a casual meeting or an innocent errand. There was purpose in their movements, something planned and rehearsed. When he returned home, he searched public records for the address and found it linked to a temporary lease under a false name. The discovery left him unsettled. Days turned into nights filled with restless thoughts. He noticed small withdrawals appearing on their bank statements, amounts too specific to be random but small enough to avoid suspicion. Talia seemed increasingly distracted, checking her phone with a nervous urgency. Marcus's worries shifted from personal betrayal to something deeper, more dangerous. What he had seen at the rental house hinted at involvement in something far more complicated than infidelity. He couldn't yet understand the full picture, but he knew he was no longer dealing with a simple secret. Something hidden was unfolding around him, and he had stepped into the middle of it without meaning to. Marcus realized he wasn't over his head when the patterns he had been quietly tracking began connecting to something larger than a private relationship. What started as a personal investigation had slowly evolved into a maze of inconsistencies he couldn't explain alone. Unsure of what to do next, he reached out to Lewis, a retired officer known for his level-headedness and experience in handling sensitive situations. Marcus didn't reveal everything at first, only the details that felt safe to share, but Lewis immediately recognized the warning signs hidden in the information. Lewis reviewed the bank statements, the address, and the unfamiliar man Marcus had described. His expression darkened as he identified behaviors commonly associated with small organized financial schemes operations that used everyday people as tools without their full knowledge. He explained that certain groups recruited individuals through manipulation, pressure, or false promises, often blurring the line between victim and participant. Marcus listened quietly, feeling the ground beneath him shift again. Lewis made a discreet call to an investigator still active in the department. He avoided using names or specific identifiers, focusing instead on the behaviors and locations Marcus had uncovered. The investigator agreed to look into it, assuring Lewis he would keep the inquiry unofficial until they understood what they were dealing with. But the situation changed rapidly. Within days, Marcus noticed unfamiliar cars idling near his street. They weren't police vehicles or neighborhood visitors, but unmarked sedans with tinted windows and no clear purpose for being there. Marcus felt watched even inside his own home. When Lewis saw the vehicles himself, he confirmed they were linked to a private surveillance firm occasionally used by individuals who suspected internal leaks or feared exposure. If these people were connected to Talia's secret meetings, then they somehow knew Marcus was digging into their activities. This realization hit him harder than the affair itself. His quiet search for answers had placed him directly in someone else's line of sight. Talia's behavior shifted again. She appeared increasingly restless, pacing at odd hours and avoiding phone calls unless she stepped outside. Marcus noticed her packing small items and shredding papers. She never explained. She was hiding something bigger than betrayal, something capable of drawing dangerous attention. Lewis urged Marcus to be cautious and to avoid confronting her until they had more clarity. But the more Marcus observed, the clearer it became that whatever Talia was involved in had begun to unravel. And as the pressure around her intensified, so did the risks for everyone connected to her, including Marcus, who now found himself entangled in a situation far beyond what he had ever imagined. The situation shifted dramatically when an anonymous tip reached law enforcement about unusual activity tied to the quiet rental house Marcus had seen Talia enter. Marcus did not know who made the call, but the effect was immediate. Investigators placed discreet surveillance on the property, far more skilled and deliberate than the unmarked cars that had previously hovered around his neighborhood. For the first time, professionals were watching the same puzzle he had been trying to piece together alone. Activity at the rental house increased noticeably once surveillance was in place. Different individuals visited the property at inconsistent hours, their faces covered or partially hidden. Some stayed only long enough to hand off sealed envelopes, while others went inside for tense, short meetings with the man Marcus had seen with Talia. These movements revealed a level of organization that went beyond a simple partnership or affair. It suggested a network operating quietly under the radar, hoping to avoid attention while carrying out something far more coordinated and secretive. The rental home itself revealed more as investigators dug deeper. Property records pointed to a shell company created months earlier, with no listed employees and no office location. It was the kind of setup used to move money, hide ownership, or store sensitive materials without being easily traced. Each discovery connected another thread in a complex web Marcus never imagined would be linked to his personal life. Meanwhile, Talia's behavior at home grew increasingly erratic. She slept little, kept her phone close, and often stared at the screen with a tense stillness that suggested she was waiting for instructions or warnings. She started leaving the house at unpredictable times, carrying small bags she refused to explain. Marcus, already on edge, sensed she was preparing for something drastic. The breaking point arrived one afternoon when he returned home to find the place in disarray. Drawers had been emptied, closets were half open, and several of Talia's belongings were gone. Her car was missing, and so were documents Marcus had noticed her hiding in recent days. It was clear she had left in a rush, possibly spooked by someone or something. Within hours, investigators contacted Lewis with a significant update. The rental house had been abandoned, its occupants fleeing only minutes before officers quietly approached. Inside, they found discarded documents, damaged electronics, and fragments of financial records. Among them was a single sheet of paper with Marcus's name written on it, confirming he had been pulled into something far larger than he realized. The quiet world he once lived in had fully collapsed, and the truth was beginning to surface in ways he could no longer escape. Marcus felt a cold weight settle in his chest when he learned his name had been found among the scattered documents in the abandoned rental house. Until that moment, he had believed he was only a bystander, someone who discovered too much by accident. Now he understood that the people involved had been watching him, tracking his movements as carefully as he had been tracking theirs. The realization left him with a deep unease that followed him through every hour of the day. Investigators pieced together what they could from the remnants inside the house. The damaged electronics revealed partial transaction logs showing money moved through various accounts, many belonging to unsuspecting individuals who had no idea they were being used. Talia's financial patterns matched those of someone recruited to assist with transfers, possibly under pressure or manipulation. It was unclear how deeply she had been involved, or whether she had known the full purpose of the network, but her disappearance suggested she understood enough to fear what would happen next. Marcus struggled with conflicting emotions. The betrayal still hurt, but it had become tangled with a complex concern for her safety. He couldn't tell whether she had left to protect herself, to protect him, or simply to escape the consequences. Every unanswered question pulled him deeper into a sense of uncertainty he could not shake. The investigation continued for weeks, gradually revealing more of the network's structure. Several individuals connected to the shell company were brought in for questioning, though most offered little information. They claimed minimal involvement, insisting they were only following instructions from people higher up. Talia's name surfaced repeatedly, not as a leader, but as someone who had made frequent deliveries and handled transactions she may not have fully understood. Despite the pressure surrounding the case, Marcus never saw her again. Her car was later found abandoned outside the city, wiped clean of personal items. No messages were left behind, no clues to explain her final movements. The investigators suspected she fled before the network could turn against her, using whatever little she had saved to disappear quietly. Marcus tried returning to a normal life, but the experience had altered him. He learned to rely less on assumptions and more on awareness. The world he once viewed as predictable now felt layered, with hidden motives behind seemingly ordinary actions. Over time, the chaos settled, though the unanswered questions remained. In the end, he accepted that some truths never arrive neatly packaged. Some endings are open, unresolved, and shaped by choices made in moments of fear. And while the betrayal changed him, it also taught him that even in the quietest lives, secrets can grow powerful enough to break everything in their path.